When Nathan Reed stood between a billion-dollar CEO and her private jet at a New Jersey terminal, he had no idea his life was about to explode. The aviation engineer's quiet refusal to let a dangerous aircraft fly would spark a war with one of the most powerful women in corporate America, a woman who would try to destroy him, investigate him, and ultimately change everything he thought he knew about survival, trust, and second chances. If you want to see how a single father's courage transforms into something no one expected, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Nathan Reed's morning started the way every Thursday morning started for the past 3 years, with burnt toast, a tangled ponytail, and his 7-year-old daughter Emma standing in the kitchen doorway wearing mismatched socks. "Dad, you forgot to sign my permission slip again." Nathan looked up from the coffee maker, eyes still half closed, and saw Emma holding a crumpled piece of paper covered in marker drawings of airplanes. He'd meant to sign it Tuesday, then Wednesday. Now it was Thursday, and the field trip was tomorrow. "Right, sorry, kiddo. Put it on the counter." Please. Emma dropped the paper next to his keys and walked over to the toaster, where 2 blackened pieces of bread were smoking gently. She poked one with her finger and looked at him with the kind of patient disappointment only a child could manage. "You burned them again." "They're not burned. They're extra crispy." "Dad, they're black. That's just advanced toasting." Emma rolled her eyes and grabbed a granola bar from the cabinet instead. Nathan watched her move through the kitchen with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd learned early how to take care of herself when adults forgot the small things. It made him proud and sad at the same time. He checked his watch. 6:45. He had 15 minutes to get Emma to school and still make it to the hangar by 7:30. His supervisor had been on his case about punctuality ever since Nathan refused to cut corners on a pre-flight inspection last month. Apparently saving lives wasn't as important as keeping rich clients happy. "Let's go, Em. Grab your backpack." Emma slung her bag over her shoulder and followed him to the door. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, narrow hallway, kitchen barely big enough for one person, but it was theirs. Nathan had moved here after leaving the Air Force, after everything fell apart, after he realized his daughter needed stability more than he needed a career. The drive to Emma's school took 12 minutes through surface streets lined with chain restaurants and auto repair shops. Emma sat in the passenger seat quietly, her fingers tracing patterns on the window glass. "You're working late again tonight, right?" she asked. "Probably. Mrs. Chen said she can pick you up after school and you can hang out at her place until I'm done. She always makes me do homework first. That's because she's smart." Emma made a face but didn't argue. Nathan pulled up to the school drop-off zone and leaned over to kiss the top of her head. "Love you, kiddo. Be good." "Love you too." She climbed out of the car, backpack bouncing against her shoulders as she ran toward the front doors where other kids were gathering in clusters. Nathan watched until she disappeared inside, then pulled back into traffic and headed toward the private aviation terminal on the edge of the airfield. The facility was sleek, modern, designed to make billionaires feel comfortable while they waited for their jets. Glass walls, leather chairs, espresso machines that cost more than Nathan's monthly rent. He parked in the employee lot and walked through the service entrance, nodding at the security guard who barely looked up from his phone. The hangar was massive. High ceilings, polished concrete floors, rows of private aircraft gleaming under industrial lighting. Nathan's workspace was in the back corner near the maintenance bay, a cluttered desk covered in technical manuals, inspection reports, and a framed photo of Emma holding a toy helicopter. His coworker Jake was already there, leaning against the desk with a cup of coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. "You're late. I'm 2 minutes early." "Ivdi?" "Downtights." "Harris was looking for you. Seemed pissed." Nathan dropped his bag on the desk and pulled on his work jacket. "When isn't he pissed?" "Fair point." Jake took a sip of coffee and nodded toward the main hangar floor. "We've got a last-minute job. Some CEO needs her jet ready in 90 minutes. Harris wants you on the pre-flight." "Who's the client?" "Vivian Sinclair." Nathan paused mid-zip. He'd heard the name before. Most people in the aviation industry had. Vivian Sinclair was the founder and CEO of Apex Global Holdings, a multinational investment firm worth billions. She was famous for hostile takeovers, brutal negotiations, and a personal management style that made grown executives cry in boardrooms. Forbes called her the Ice Queen of corporate America. Business Insider ran a profile titled "The Woman Nobody Wants to Work For." Says, "Great," Nathan muttered. "One of those." "Yep. Apparently she's flying to Miami for some merger deal, and she's already screaming at people in the terminal because her original aircraft had mechanical issues. Harris moved her to one of ours." Nathan grabbed his inspection checklist and started walking toward the hangar floor. "Which plane?" "City." The Gulfstream, tail number November 74 Tango Mike. Nathan found the aircraft parked near the fueling station, a sleek white Gulfstream G650 with polished chrome accents and leather seats visible through the cabin windows. It was one of the nicest jets in their fleet, the kind of plane that cost $70 million new and required obsessive maintenance to keep airworthy. He started his inspection at the nose, checking the weather radar housing, the pitot tubes, the windshield seals. Everything looked clean. He moved down the fuselage, running his hands along the surface panels, looking for any signs of stress fractures or corrosion. The wings were next: flaps, ailerons, fuel caps, navigation lights. All good. Then he crouched down near the landing gear. The hydraulic line running from the main strut to the retraction actuator was wet. Nathan leaned closer, wiping his finger across the metal surface. The fluid was clear with a faint amber tint. Hydraulic oil. Fresh. He traced the line upward and found the source, a hairline crack in the pressure fitting where the hose connected to the actuator housing. It was small, barely visible, but leaking steadily. Under normal pressures during flight, that crack would widen. The system would lose fluid. The landing gear might not deploy properly when they tried to land. Nathan stood up and pulled out his phone, snapping photos of the leak from multiple angles. Then he walked back to the maintenance office and found Jake sitting at the computer. "We've got a problem with the Gulfstream." Jake looked up. "What kind of problem?" "Hydraulic leak on the main landing gear. The line's compromised. We need to replace it before the aircraft flies." "How long will that take?" 3 hours minimum. Maybe 4 if we have to order the part. Jake's face went pale. "Harris said this plane needs to be in the air in 90 minutes. Then Harris needs to find another plane because this one isn't going anywhere." Jake stood up and grabbed his radio. "I'll tell him. But you know he's going to lose his mind, right?" "Not my problem." Nathan walked back to his desk and started filling out the maintenance report. He was halfway through the paperwork when his supervisor, Marcus Harris, came storming across the hangar floor, his face red and his tie slightly loosened like he'd been pulling at it. "Reed, what the hell is this about a hydraulic leak?" Nathan didn't look up from the report. "Main landing gear. Pressure fitting has a crack. Needs to be replaced before flight." "How bad is the leak?" "Bad enough that I'm grounding the aircraft." Harris leaned over the desk, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Do you have any idea who's waiting in that terminal right now?" I know exactly who's waiting. Vivian Sinclair has a meeting in Miami in 4 hours. This flight is worth $200,000 to the company. If we cancel, she'll take her business somewhere else and probably sue us for breach of contract." Nathan finally looked up, his expression flat. "And if that landing gear fails during approach and the plane crashes, she'll be dead and we'll be explaining to the NTSB why we let a compromised aircraft fly." "You're being dramatic." "I'm being thorough." Harris straightened up, his jaw tight. "How long to fix it?" 3 to 4 hours. "We don't have 3 to 4 hours. "Then she doesn't have a plane." "Oh." Harris stared at him for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Then he turned and walked back toward the terminal without another word. Nathan went back to his paperwork. 10 minutes later, Jake appeared at his desk again, this time looking nervous. Nathan? Ms. Sinclair wants to talk to you." "About what?" "The plane. She wants you to explain the problem directly." Nathan closed the maintenance report and stood up. "Fine. Where is she?" "Meet. Terminal lounge. Harris is with her." Nathan followed Jake through the service corridor and into the main terminal building. The lounge was on the second floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the airfield, modern furniture arranged in conversation clusters, a full bar along one wall. It was empty except for 3 people standing near the windows. Marcus Harris, a man in an expensive suit holding a leather briefcase, and Vivian Sinclair. She was smaller than Nathan expected, maybe 5'6" in heels, slim build, dark hair pulled back into a tight bun. She wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Nathan's car, and her posture radiated the kind of controlled impatience that came from spending years making people afraid of disappointing her. When Nathan walked in, she turned and looked at him with eyes that were sharp, cold, and utterly unimpressed. "You're the engineer?" "Yes, ma'am. Nathan Reed. Mr. Reed, I'm told you've grounded my aircraft." "That's correct." "On what grounds?" Nathan pulled out his phone and opened the photos of the hydraulic leak. He held the screen toward her. "There's a crack in the pressure fitting on the main landing gear hydraulic line. The system is actively leaking fluid. If the plane takes off, there's a significant risk the landing gear won't deploy properly during approach." Vivian glanced at the photos for less than 2 seconds, then looked back at Nathan. "How significant?" "Significant enough that I'm not signing off on the flight." "I didn't ask about your signature. I asked about the risk." Nathan lowered his phone. "If the hydraulic pressure drops below a certain threshold, the landing gear may not lock into position. That means you'd be attempting a belly landing or relying on the backup manual extension system, which isn't guaranteed to work if the primary system has already failed." "What's the probability of failure?" "I can't give you an exact number. Give me an estimate. High enough that it's not worth the risk." Vivian's expression didn't change. "Mr. Reed, I have a meeting in Miami in less than 4 hours. That meeting is worth $800 million to my company. Your delay is going to cost me money, time, and leverage in a negotiation I've been working on for 6 months. I understand that. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're being overly cautious about a minor leak that may or may not cause a problem." Nathan felt his jaw tighten. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this isn't a minor leak. It's a structural failure in a critical system. If you take off in that plane, you're gambling with your life and the lives of your crew. I'm willing to take that risk." "I'm not." Vivian took a step closer, her voice dropping to a tone that was calm, precise, and absolutely venomous. "Let me be very clear, Mr. Reed. I don't care about your personal risk tolerance. I care about getting to Miami on time. Now, you're going to go back to that hangar, sign off on the pre-flight inspection, and get my aircraft ready to depart. Or I'm going to make one phone call to your CEO and have you removed from this job permanently." Nathan looked at her for a long moment. Behind her, Marcus Harris was nodding frantically, his face pleading. The man in the suit was watching the exchange with the detached interest of someone who'd seen this kind of confrontation before and knew how it always ended. Nathan took a breath. "No." Vivian blinked. It was the smallest reaction, just a flicker of surprise crossing her face before the cold mask slid back into place. "Excuse me?" "I said no. I'm not signing off on that plane. You can call whoever you want, but I'm not putting my name on a flight I know is unsafe." The silence that followed was so thick Nathan could feel it pressing against his chest. Vivian's voice, when she spoke again, was quiet and deliberate. "You just made a very serious mistake. Maybe, but at least you'll be alive to see it." Nathan turned and walked out of the lounge. Behind him, he heard Marcus Harris start to stammer an apology, his voice high and panicked. Vivian didn't respond. Nathan didn't look back. He went straight to his desk, finished the maintenance report, and submitted it to the safety database. Then he locked his computer, grabbed his jacket, and walked out to the parking lot. His phone rang before he even reached his car. Marcus Harris. Nathan declined the call. It rang again. He declined again. By the time he got home, he had 6 missed calls and 3 voicemails. He didn't listen to any of them. Instead, he heated up leftover pasta, sat on the couch, and stared at the wall until it was time to pick up Emma from Mrs. Chen's apartment. That night, Emma asked him if something was wrong. "No, kiddo, just a long day." "You look sad." "I'm not sad, just tired." Emma climbed onto the couch next to him and leaned her head against his shoulder. "Mrs. Chen says when grown-ups are tired, it usually means they're worried about something." Nathan wrapped his arm around her and kissed the top of her head. "Mrs. Chen talks too much. She also said you're a good dad." "Well, she's right about that part." Emma smiled and turned her attention back to the TV. Nathan closed his eyes and tried not to think about the phone calls he was ignoring or the probability that tomorrow he'd be walking into the hangar to find a termination notice waiting on his desk. He'd made the right call. He knew that. But right calls didn't always protect you. The next morning, Nathan woke up to 17 missed calls and a text message from Jake. "Dude, you need to get here now." He dropped Emma at school, drove to the hangar, and walked through the service entrance expecting to be fired immediately. Instead, he found Marcus Harris standing in the middle of the hangar floor, surrounded by 3 FAA inspectors, 2 company lawyers, and a dozen employees who were all staring at the Gulf Stream like it had grown a second wing overnight. Jake grabbed Nathan's arm the moment he walked in. "They inspected the plane this morning. And you were right. The hydraulic line was worse than anyone thought. The mechanics pulled it apart and found stress fractures all through the actuator housing. If that plane had taken off, the landing gear would have collapsed on approach." Nathan felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Where's Sinclair?" "She got rerouted to a different aircraft yesterday. Took off an hour after you left. But when the FAA found out about the leak, they launched a full investigation into how the plane passed the last inspection. Harris is probably getting fired." Nathan looked across the hangar at his supervisor. Nathan looked across, who was pale and sweating while one of the lawyers spoke to him in a low, urgent voice. "What about me?" Jake grinned. "Dude, you're a hero. You probably saved her life. The company's PR team is already drafting a statement about how seriously we take safety protocols." Nathan didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired. "Great. Can I get back to work now?" "Yeah, but Nathan?" Jake's grin faded slightly. "Sinclair's not happy. I heard she tried to get you fired yesterday. When the company refused, she called the CEO directly. You're probably going to want to lay low for a while." Nathan nodded and walked to his desk. He didn't lay low. 3 days later, airport security footage leaked online. It was grainy, shot from a camera mounted near the terminal entrance, but the audio was clear. The video showed Nathan standing in the lounge, Vivian Sinclair stepping toward him, and their entire confrontation playing out in real time. Someone had edited the clip to include captions highlighting Nathan's refusal and Vivian's threat to have him fired. The video went viral in 6 hours. By the end of the day, Nathan's face was on the front page of aviation forums, Reddit threads, and Twitter feeds. People were calling him a hero. News outlets were picking up the story. A local reporter showed up at the hangar asking for an interview. Nathan declined. But the damage was done. Vivian Sinclair's name was trending alongside phrases like reckless, arrogant, and almost died because of her own ego. Business analysts were questioning her judgment. Investors were nervous. Her own board of directors issued a public statement saying they were reviewing the incident. And Nathan, the quiet single father who just wanted to do his job and go home to his daughter, became the man who humiliated one of the most powerful CEOs in America. He didn't want the attention. But Vivian Sinclair wasn't the kind of woman who forgot, and she sure as hell wasn't the kind of woman who forgave. 2 weeks after the video leaked, Nathan received a formal letter from Apex Global Holdings' legal department. They were suing him for defamation, claiming he'd deliberately leaked the security footage to damage Vivian Sinclair's reputation. Nathan sat at his kitchen table staring at the letter and realized his quiet life was over. The war had just begun. The lawyer's name was David Garrett, and he had the kind of face that suggested he'd spent his entire career telling people bad news in conference rooms. Nathan sat across from him in a cramped office above a tax preparation service in downtown Newark. The furniture was worn, the carpet stained, and the motivational poster on the wall, a kitten hanging from a tree branch with the caption, "Hang in there," had seen better days. "So let me get this straight," David said, flipping through the lawsuit documents. "Vivian Sinclair's claiming you orchestrated the leak of security footage to intentionally damage her reputation and interfere with her business operations." "That's insane. I didn't leak anything." "Can you prove that?" Nathan stared at him. "How am I supposed to prove I didn't do something?" "Well, that's the problem. In a defamation case, the burden of proof is tricky. They have to prove you leaked it, but they're also alleging malicious intent based on the confrontation itself. The video shows you two arguing. It shows her threatening your job. A jury might see that and think you had motive for retaliation. "I was doing my job. I stopped an unsafe plane from flying." "I believe you. But Sinclair's legal team is arguing that you went beyond professional duty and entered personal vendetta territory when that video went public. David closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. Taking this to trial is going to cost you at least $60,000, maybe more. And even if you win, Sinclair has enough money to appeal and drag this out for years. Nathan felt his chest tighten. So what are you saying? I'm saying you should consider settling. Apologize publicly, sign an NDA, and this goes away. Apologize for what? For keeping people safe? For the video. For the public embarrassment. It doesn't matter if you leaked it or not. Her reputation took a hit, and she wants someone to pay for it. Nathan stood up, his hands clenched at his sides. I'm not apologizing to someone who tried to get me fired for doing the right thing. David sighed. Then you're going to need a better lawyer than me, because this woman has resources you can't even imagine, and she's not going to stop until she gets what she wants. Nathan left the office and sat in his car for 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel and trying to figure out how his life had spiraled so far out of control in less than a month. His phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Chen. Emma's been asking about the news articles. What should I tell her? Nathan closed his eyes and pressed his forehead against the steering wheel. He couldn't afford a lawyer. He couldn't afford to settle. And he definitely couldn't afford to lose this fight in court while trying to raise a 7-year-old daughter who was already starting to notice that something was wrong. That night, Emma asked him directly, Dad, why are people saying mean things about you online? They were sitting at the kitchen table, Emma's homework spread out between them. Nathan had been helping her with math problems when she'd suddenly looked up with that serious expression she got when she was worried. Who told you that? Some kids at school. Their parents saw the videos. Nathan put down his pencil. What videos? The one where you're arguing with the lady. They said she's really rich and really mad at you. Nathan took a breath. Emma, do you remember when I told you about my job? How I make sure airplanes are safe before they fly? Yeah. That lady wanted to fly on a plane that wasn't safe. I told her no. She got mad, and now she's trying to get me in trouble for it. Emma frowned. But you were just trying to help. I know. So why is she being mean? Nathan didn't have a good answer for that. Sometimes people get mad when you tell them something they don't want to hear. Emma was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I think you did the right thing. Thanks, kiddo. But 2 days later, things got worse. Nathan was at work when Marcus Harris called him into the office. The regional manager was there too, a man named Stevens who Nathan had only met once, during his initial hiring interview 3 years ago. Sit down, Reed, Stevens said. Nathan sat. We've received a formal complaint from Apex Global Holdings regarding your conduct during the incident with Ms. Sinclair. They're alleging professional misconduct, harassment, and improper use of company resources. Nathan's stomach dropped. That's not true. We're not saying it is, but the complaint has triggered a mandatory internal review. Until that review is complete, we're placing you on administrative leave. You're suspending me? It's paid leave. You'll still receive your salary, but you can't be on company property or involved in any flight operations until this is resolved. Nathan looked at Marcus Harris, who wouldn't meet his eyes. How long is this going to take? Stephen shrugged. Could be 2 weeks. Could be 2 months. Depends on what the legal team finds. Nathan stood up. So I'm guilty until proven innocent. You're on leave pending investigation. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. Nathan walked out of the office, grabbed his jacket, and left the hangar without saying goodbye to anyone. Jake caught up with him in the parking lot. Nathan, wait. I don't want to talk about it. Dude, this is insane. Everyone knows you didn't do anything wrong. Doesn't matter what everyone knows, matters what the lawyers decide. Nathan unlocked his car door. I'll see you around, Jake. Oh. He drove home in silence, parked in the apartment lot, and sat there for 30 minutes trying to figure out how he was going to explain to Emma that he'd been suspended from work because a billionaire CEO was mad at him. In the end, he didn't tell her anything, just said he had some time off, and they could spend more afternoons together. Emma seemed happy about that, at least. But Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. A week into his suspension, Nathan got a call from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Reed, this is Carolyn Voss. I'm an investigative reporter with the Newark Observer. I'm working on a story about the Vivian Sinclair incident, and I'd love to get your perspective." Nathan was standing in the cereal aisle of a grocery store with Emma tugging on his sleeve, asking if they could get the one with marshmallows. "I'm not interested. I understand you're dealing with a lawsuit right now. I think the public deserves to hear your side of the story." "The public already knows my side. It's on video. But there's more context, isn't there? I've been looking into Ms. Sinclair's history. This isn't the first time she's retaliated against employees who challenged her decisions." Nathan grabbed a box of cereal, the boring kind without marshmallows, and dropped it in the cart. "I really can't talk about this. What if I told you I found 3 other cases in the past 5 years where Sinclair used legal threats to silence people who spoke out against her? Engineers, whistleblowers, former executives. All of them were buried under NDAs and settlement agreements." Nathan stopped walking. Emma was already halfway down the aisle, distracted by a display of cookies shaped like cartoon characters. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think you are not going to be the last person she does this to, and I think someone needs to push back." Carolyn paused. "Look, I'm not asking you to go on the record, but if you're willing to talk, even off the record, it might help me build a case that shows a pattern of behavior." Nathan watched Emma trying to reach a box on the top shelf, standing on her tiptoes with her tongue sticking out in concentration. "I'll think about it." "That's all I'm asking. My number's in your call log. Use it if you change your mind." Carolyn hung up. Nathan finished shopping, took Emma home, and spent the rest of the evening wondering if talking to a reporter would make things better or infinitely worse. He didn't have to wonder long. 2 days later, the Newark Observer published a front-page story titled "The Cost of Saying No: How Vivian Sinclair Silences Critics." Nathan's case was featured prominently, but so were 4 others. A former VP who'd questioned an acquisition strategy and been forced out with a legal gag order. An accountant who'd raised concerns about financial reporting and ended up settling a defamation suit. A junior analyst who'd filed an HR complaint and found herself unemployed within a month. The article was detailed, well-researched, and absolutely damning. Nathan's phone started ringing before he even finished reading it. Jake called first. "Holy shit, dude, did you see the article?" "Yeah. This is huge. People are going to lose their minds." He was right. By noon, the story had been picked up by 3 major news outlets. By evening, it was trending on social media. Business analysts were dissecting Vivian Sinclair's leadership style on cable news. Investors were demanding answers. The stock price of Apex Global Holdings dropped 4% in a single day. Nathan didn't feel victorious. He felt exposed. That night, Emma asked him why there were reporters standing outside their apartment building. "They want to talk to me about work stuff." "Are they going to make you famous?" "I hope not." Emma looked worried. "Famous people always seem stressed on TV." "That's because being famous is terrible." "Then why do people want to be famous?" Nathan didn't have a good answer for that either. The lawsuit was still active. The company investigation was still ongoing, and now Nathan's face was on the evening news with chyrons that read, "Engineer versus Billionaire, the fight for accountability." He just wanted to fix airplanes and raise his daughter. Instead, he was becoming a symbol for something he'd never asked to represent. 3 weeks after the Newark Observer article, Nathan received a message from someone he'd never expected to hear from. It came through LinkedIn, a private message from an account with no profile picture, and a generic name that looked like a placeholder. The message was short. "We need to talk. Meet me at Sullivan's Diner on Route 9 tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone." Nathan stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. But the next day at 1:55 p.m., he found himself pulling into the parking lot of Sullivan's Diner anyway. The place was nearly empty. A handful of truckers at the counter, an elderly couple in a corner booth, and one woman sitting by the window wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. Vivian Sinclair. Nathan almost turned around and walked out, but she'd already seen him. She gestured to the seat across from her. Nathan hesitated, then sat down. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Up close, Vivian looked different than she had in the terminal. Tired. Older. The sharp edges of her composure had softened into something that looked almost human. "You came," she said. "I'm an idiot." "Probably." Vivian took off her sunglasses and set them on the table. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. I'm not signing anything. I'm not asking you to." She folded her hands on the table. "I was wrong." Nathan blinked. "I was wrong," Vivian repeated. "About the plane, about you, about the way I handled the entire situation. You were doing your job, and I tried to punish you for it because I was too arrogant to admit that I'd made a mistake." Nathan didn't know what to say. Vivian continued. "I spent the last month having my lawyers dig into your background. I wanted to find something, anything, that would justify what I did. Some pattern of misconduct, some evidence that you were unreliable or had a vendetta against me." She shook her head. "Do you know what they found? No, nothing. You're exactly who you appear to be. A single father who left the Air Force to raise his daughter. A man who spent 3 years keeping his head down, doing good work, and trying not to attract attention." She paused. "And I almost destroyed you because I couldn't stand the idea of someone telling me no." Nathan's throat felt tight. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired of being the person everyone's afraid of, and because you deserve to hear it." Vivian reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I'm dropping the lawsuit. My lawyers are filing the paperwork this afternoon. You'll receive formal notification by the end of the week." Nathan stared at the folder. "Just like that?" Just like that. "What about the company investigation?" "I've already contacted your employer. The complaint has been withdrawn. You'll be reinstated with full back pay and a formal apology." Nathan felt something crack open in his chest. Relief mixed with anger, mixed with exhaustion. "You realize you could have done this a month ago, right? Before the lawyers, before the suspension, before my daughter started getting bullied at school because her dad's face was all over the news?" Vivian's expression tightened. "I know. See, do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you only care now because the press made you look bad." "That's part of it," Vivian admitted. "But it's not all of it. I saw the video of our conversation. Really watched it, I mean. And I saw the way you looked at me when I threatened your job. You weren't scared. You were just disappointed. Like you'd expected better, and I'd failed to meet the bar." Down at her hands. "I can't remember the last time someone looked at me like that." Nathan didn't know what to say to that. Vivian stood up. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand what I did, and I'm trying to fix it." She put her sunglasses back on and walked out of the diner without waiting for a response. Nathan sat there for another 10 minutes, staring at the folder on the table, before finally opening it. Inside was a single document, a formal withdrawal of all legal complaints, signed by Vivian Sinclair and dated that morning. He drove home in a daze. That evening, Emma asked him if he was going back to work soon. "Yeah, kiddo. Looks like I am." "Good. I missed hearing your airplane stories." Nathan pulled her into a hug and held on a little longer than usual. The next week, Nathan returned to the hangar. His coworkers treated him like a celebrity, clapping when he walked in, asking for autographs as a joke, giving him high fives in the hallway. Jake brought a cake that said, "Welcome back, hero," in blue frosting. Nathan hated every second of it, but Marcus Harris pulled him aside before he could get to his desk. "Reed, I owe you an apology." Nathan shrugged. "You were doing what you thought you had to do. I was covering my ass and letting you take the fall for it. That's not the same thing." Marcus held out his hand. "I'm glad you're back." Nathan shook it. Work returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after everything that had happened. Nathan went back to pre-flight inspections, maintenance reports, and the quiet rhythm of making sure planes were safe before they carried people into the sky. But something had changed. People recognized him now. At the grocery store, at Emma's school, at the gas station. They'd come up and shake his hand, thank him for standing up to corporate power, tell him he was an inspiration. Nathan didn't feel like an inspiration. He felt like someone who'd done the bare minimum and somehow ended up at the center of a media circus he'd never wanted to join. One afternoon, about a month after his return, Nathan was finishing an inspection on a Cessna Citation when his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Vivian. Can we talk?" Nathan stared at the message for a long time before responding. "About what?" The reply came immediately. "Something I think you'll want to hear." They met at the same diner. This time, Vivian wasn't wearing sunglasses or a hat. She looked composed, professional, but there was something different in the way she carried herself. Less armor, maybe. "Thank you for coming," she said. Nathan sat down across from her. "What's this about?" Vivian slid a folder across the table. "I've been working on something for the past few weeks. I wanted to run it by you before making it public." Nathan opened the folder. Inside were architectural renderings, budget projections, and a mission statement for something called the Reed Aviation Safety Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to training young engineers and pilots in safety protocols, with a focus on creating systems that prioritize human lives over profit margins. Nathan looked up. "What is this?" "It's an apology," Vivian said. "A real one. Not just words, but action. I'm funding it entirely out of my personal assets. No corporate money, no tax write-offs, no strings attached. The goal is to create a program that teaches the next generation of aviation professionals to do exactly what you did. Stand up and say no when something's unsafe, even if it costs them." Nathan flipped through the pages, his hands shaking slightly. "Why are you doing this?" "Ishko?" "Because I can't undo what I did to you, but maybe I can make sure it doesn't happen to someone else." Vivian leaned forward. "I also want to offer you a position on the board of directors. You'd have full oversight of the curriculum and training programs. You'd be involved in every decision." "I'm not qualified for that." "You're the most qualified person I know. You risked your career to do the right thing. That's exactly the kind of leadership this foundation needs." Nathan closed the folder. "I need time to think about this." "Take all the time you need. But Nathan?" Vivian's voice softened. "I mean what I said. I'm trying to be better, and I think this might be a way to turn something terrible into something that actually matters." Nathan took the folder home. That night, after Emma was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table and read through every page. The foundation was real. The funding was real. The mission statement talked about accountability, transparency, and creating a culture where safety wasn't negotiable. It was everything Nathan believed in, wrapped up in a package he'd never expected to receive. But it also meant stepping further into the public eye. It meant working with Vivian Sinclair, the woman who'd tried to destroy him. It meant taking on responsibilities that went far beyond fixing planes and going home to his daughter. Nathan thought about Emma's words. "You always tell me brave people don't run away from fixing things." He thought about the engineers and pilots who might face the same choice he'd faced. Speak up and risk everything, or stay quiet and hope for the best. He thought about the life he'd built in the shadows, safe and small and predictable. And then he thought about what it might look like to step into the light. The next morning, Nathan called Vivian. "I'm in," he said. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "I want full transparency. Every decision, every dollar, every policy gets reviewed by an independent ethics board. And if I ever think this foundation is being used for PR instead of actual change, I walk." "Agreed." "And one more thing, my daughter comes first, always. If this job interferes with being her dad, I'm out." Vivian was quiet for a moment. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Nathan hung up and stared at his phone. He'd spent 3 years trying to stay invisible. Now he was about to step into something that would put him on a stage he'd never wanted. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the only way to protect the small, quiet life he'd built was to fight for something bigger. The press conference was scheduled for a Thursday morning at the Apex Global Holdings headquarters in Manhattan, and Nathan spent the entire drive from New Jersey trying not to throw up. Emma had asked him that morning why he was wearing a tie. "I have a meeting." "You never wear ties." "This one's important." She'd looked at him with that worried expression she got when she knew he wasn't telling her everything. "Are you nervous?" "A little." "You'll do great, Dad. You always do." Nathan wished he had half her confidence. Now he was standing in a glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor, surrounded by publicists, lawyers, and Vivian Sinclair, who looked completely calm in a navy suit that probably cost more than Nathan's monthly rent. "You ready?" she asked. "No." "Good. That means you're taking it seriously." Vivian straightened his tie, a gesture so casual and unexpected that Nathan froze. She noticed his reaction and stepped back. "Sorry. Force of habit. I used to do that for my father before board meetings." Nathan had read about Vivian's father in the research packet her team had sent over. Richard Sinclair, founder of Apex Global Holdings, had died of a heart attack 6 years ago and left the company to his only daughter. Most of the business world had expected her to fail. Instead, she doubled the company's value in 3 years and earned a reputation as one of the most ruthless executives in the industry. Nathan wondered if her father would be proud of what she'd become, or horrified. A publicist poked her head into the room. "We're ready for you." Vivian nodded, then looked at Nathan. "Just stick to the talking points. I'll handle the hard questions." "What if they ask me something we didn't prepare for?" "Then tell the truth. That's all anyone wants anyway." They walked into the main conference room where 24 reporters were already seated, cameras positioned at the front, phones recording everything. Nathan recognized a few faces from the news coverage. Carolyn Voss from the Newark Observer, a correspondent from CNN, someone from the Wall Street Journal. Vivian stepped up to the podium first. "Thank you all for coming. 3 months ago, I made a serious mistake. I allowed my ego and my schedule to override my judgment, and in doing so, I put lives at risk, including my own." Nathan Reed, a senior aviation engineer, stopped me from making a decision that could have been catastrophic. Instead of thanking him, I tried to punish him. I used my position and resources to intimidate, threaten, and silence someone who was simply doing his job. The room was silent, except for the clicking of camera shutters. Vivian continued, "I can't undo what I did, but I can commit to doing better. Today, I'm announcing the creation of the Reed Aviation Safety Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to training the next generation of engineers and pilots to prioritize safety over convenience, profit, or pressure from authority. This foundation will be funded entirely through my personal assets and will operate independently of Apex Global Holdings." She gestured to Nathan. "I've asked Mr. Reed to join the board of directors and help shape the foundation's mission. He's agreed, with the understanding that this organization exists to create real change, not to rehabilitate my reputation." Nathan stepped up to the podium, his hands shaking slightly. "I'm not good at public speaking," he started. "I'm better with airplanes than people, but I agreed to do this because I think it matters. Every day, engineers and technicians face pressure to cut corners, to speed up inspections, to ignore problems because fixing them would be expensive or inconvenient. Most of the time, nothing bad happens, but sometimes it does. And when it does, people die." He looked out at the reporters. "The goal of this foundation is to create systems and training programs that make it easier for people to speak up when something's wrong. To build a culture where safety isn't negotiable, no matter who's asking you to compromise it." A reporter from the back raised her hand. "Mr. Reed, do you forgive Ms. Sinclair for what she did to you?" Nathan hadn't prepared for that question. He glanced at Vivian, who was watching him carefully. "I don't know yet," Nathan said honestly. "Forgiveness isn't something you just decide one day. It's a process. Right now, I'm focused on making sure this foundation does what it's supposed to do. If that helps repair some of the damage from the past few months, then maybe forgiveness will come later. But I'm not there yet." The reporter scribbled notes. Another hand went up. "Ms. Sinclair, critics are saying this is just a PR stunt to salvage your reputation after the stock drop. How do you respond?" Vivian didn't hesitate. "They're probably right to be skeptical. I've spent years building a reputation as someone who doesn't apologize and doesn't back down. Changing that narrative is going to take time and consistent action. I can't control what people think of me. All I can do is follow through on the commitments I've made and let the work speak for itself." The press conference lasted 40 minutes. When it was over, Nathan felt like he'd run a marathon. Vivian caught up with him in the hallway. "You did well." I felt like an idiot. "You came across as honest. That's more valuable than polish." She paused. There's a reception downstairs with some potential donors. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. Nathan checked his watch. I need to pick up my daughter from school in an hour. Of course. We'll talk next week about the board orientation. Nathan nodded and headed toward the elevators. But as he reached the lobby, Carolyn Voss intercepted him. Mr. Reed, can I have a minute? Nathan stopped. I thought you got your story already. I did. This is off the record. Carolyn lowered her voice. I wanted to give you a heads up. I've been hearing rumors that some of Sinclair's board members aren't happy about the foundation. They think she's being too soft, that she's letting you manipulate her into throwing money at a vanity project. It's not a vanity project. I know that, but there's a group within Apex that sees this whole thing as a weakness. They're talking about calling a vote to remove her as CEO. Nathan felt his stomach drop. When? Soon. Maybe next month. Don't have a timeline yet, but I thought you should know. If Sinclair gets ousted, the foundation might die with her. Nathan drove back to New Jersey in silence, his mind racing. He'd agreed to this because he thought it mattered. But if Vivian lost her position, everything they were building would collapse before it even started. And despite everything she'd done to him, Nathan realized he didn't want to see that happen. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Nathan called Vivian. Did you know your board is planning to remove you? There was a long pause on the other end. Where did you hear that? Does it matter? Is it true? Mustn't. Vivian sighed. There's always been tension. Some of them never wanted me as CEO in the first place. They see the foundation as proof that I've gone soft. Darling, yes. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet. That's not good enough. If you lose your position, the foundation is dead. I'm aware of that, Nathan. Then fight back. You're good at that, right? Being ruthless? I'm trying to be less ruthless. That's the whole point, but Nathan rubbed his face. There's a difference between being less ruthless and letting people walk all over you. You built this company. Don't let them take it from you just because you're trying to do the right thing for once. Vivian was quiet for a moment. That's the first time you've given me advice that wasn't about aircraft safety. Yeah, well, don't get used to it. She laughed, a short, surprised sound. I'll figure it out. But Nathan, thank you. For what? For caring whether I succeed or fail. I wasn't sure you would. Nathan hung up and stared at his phone. He wasn't sure when he'd started caring either. The board meeting was scheduled for 3 weeks later, and in that time, Nathan threw himself into the foundation work. He met with engineers, reviewed curriculum proposals, visited aviation schools, and conducted interviews with safety experts who wanted to be part of the program. The work was exhausting but meaningful in a way his regular job had never been. Emma noticed the difference. You seem happier, she said one night while they were making dinner. Do I? Yeah, you used to look tired all the time. Now you just look busy. Nathan smiled. There's a difference? Busy is better, tired is sad. Ew. Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds. But Emma was also struggling with the increased attention. Kids at school had stopped bullying her, but now they treated her differently, like she was special or fragile or famous by association. She hated it. I just want to be normal, she told Nathan one night. I know, kiddo. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. You were just doing your job. Doesn't mean I don't feel bad about how it's affecting you. Yes. Emma climbed onto the couch next to him. Mrs. Chen says sometimes doing the right thing is hard, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. Mrs. Chen is very smart. She also says you should ask that lady out on a date. Nathan choked on his water. What? The one from TV, the CEO lady, Mrs. Chen says she looks at you the way people look at each other in movies. Mrs. Chen needs to stop watching so many movies. Emma giggled. I'm just telling you what she said. She also is ban. Nathan had no idea how to respond to that, so he changed the subject. But later that night, after Emma was asleep, he found himself thinking about Vivian Sinclair in ways he hadn't allowed himself to before. She was smart, driven, and capable of admitting when she was wrong, which was more than Nathan could say for most people he'd met. She was also controlling, stubborn, and had literally tried to ruin his life 3 months ago. But people changed, right? Or at least they tried to. Nathan pushed the thought away and went to bed. The day of the board meeting, Vivian called Nathan at 6 in the morning. "I need a favor." Nathan sat up, groggy and disoriented. "What kind of favor?" "I need you at the meeting today, as a witness." "A witness to what?" "They're going to try to paint the foundation as a personal project that's distracting from company priorities. I want you there to explain why it matters." Nathan rubbed his eyes. "Vivian, I'm not a public speaker. You saw how I did at the press conference. You were honest. That's what I need today. Please." Nathan thought about Emma's words. Brave people don't run away from fixing things. "What time?" 2 o'clock. Apex headquarters. I'll be there." The boardroom was even more intimidating than Nathan expected. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, a table long enough to seat 20 people. Vivian sat at the head, flanked by her lawyers. The board members were arranged down both sides, their expressions ranging from neutral to openly hostile. Nathan sat in a chair against the wall, trying to be invisible. The chairman, a man named Gregory Walsh with silver hair and a pinstripe suit, called the meeting to order. "We're here to discuss a motion brought forward by several board members regarding Ms. Sinclair's recent decisions and their impact on company performance. Specifically, the creation of the Reed Aviation Safety Foundation and the allocation of personal resources to what some view as a distraction from core business objectives." Vivian leaned forward. "The foundation is funded entirely through my personal assets. It doesn't affect company operations." "It affects your focus," Walsh said. "We've seen a measurable decline in your engagement with strategic initiatives over the past 2 months. Quarterly earnings projections are down. Investor confidence is shaky. And all of this coincides with your decision to play philanthropist. I'm not playing anything. I'm trying to create something meaningful." A woman halfway down the table spoke up. "Ms. Sinclair, no one doubts your intentions, but the reality is that your public image has become a liability. The video, the lawsuit, the media coverage. It's all hurt the company's reputation. Some of us feel it's time to consider new leadership." Nathan watched Vivian's face remain perfectly calm, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "I've led this company for 6 years, Vivian said. "I've doubled our valuation, expanded into 4 new markets, and delivered consistent returns to shareholders. One difficult quarter doesn't erase that track record." "It's not about one quarter," Walsh said. "It's about judgment. You let personal emotions override business sense. You got into a public fight with an engineer, created a media circus, and are now pouring money into a foundation that does nothing to benefit this company." "That's not true." Everyone turned to look at Nathan, who hadn't meant to speak out loud. Walsh frowned. "Mr. Reed, this is a private board meeting." "I know. Ms. Sinclair asked me to be here." Nathan stood up, his heart hammering. "And I need to say something." Vivian gave him a small nod. Nathan took a breath. "The foundation isn't about benefiting this company. It's about fixing a broken system that prioritizes profit over safety. Ms. Sinclair made a mistake 3 months ago. A big one. She tried to pressure me into signing off on an unsafe aircraft because she had a meeting to get to. When I refused, she tried to destroy my career." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "But here's the thing," Nathan continued. "She didn't have to admit she was wrong. She could have buried the whole thing with NDAs and settlements and lawyers. Instead, she did something most people in her position would never do. She took responsibility. Not because it was good for business, but because it was the right thing to do. And now she's building something that might actually prevent other engineers from facing the same choice I did." Walsh crossed his arms. "That's very touching, Mr. Reed, but it doesn't address the core issue. Apex Global Holdings is not a charity. We exist to generate returns for our investors." I understand that, but you also exist because clients trust you with their lives when they board your aircraft. If you remove Ms. Sinclair now, you're sending a message that admitting mistakes and trying to fix them is a fireable offense. Is that really the precedent you want to set? The room was silent. Walsh looked at Vivian. "Ms. Sinclair, do you have anything to add?" Vivian stood. "I made a mistake. a serious one that could have cost lives. I responded poorly, and I hurt people who didn't deserve it. I can't undo that. But I can commit to being better, not just as a CEO, but as a person. If the board believes that's incompatible with leading this company, then I'll step down. But I won't apologize for trying to create something meaningful out of a terrible situation. Walsh leaned back in his chair. We'll take a vote. All in favor of removing Ms. Sinclair as CEO? 4 hands went up. All opposed? 6 hands went up. Walsh nodded. The motion fails. Ms. Sinclair retains her position. Vivian's expression didn't change, but Nathan saw her exhale slowly. The meeting adjourned 15 minutes later. Nathan waited outside the boardroom while Vivian finished speaking with her lawyers. When she finally emerged, she looked exhausted. "Thank you," she said. "I don't think I would have survived that without you." "You would have been fine." "No, I wouldn't have." She paused. "Can I buy you dinner? As a thank you?" Nathan hesitated. "I need to pick up Emma." "Bring her. I'd like to meet her properly." Nathan thought about Mrs. Chen's comment about dates and immediately felt ridiculous. "It's not a date," he said quickly. Vivian raised an eyebrow. "I didn't say it was." "Right, yeah, okay. See, they ended up at a family restaurant near Nathan's apartment, the kind of place with plastic menus and a kids section with crayons and coloring sheets. Emma was shy at first, sitting next to Nathan and barely looking at Vivian across the table. "Your dad tells me you're in 2nd grade," Vivian said. Emma nodded. "What's your favorite subject?" "Art." "What do you like to draw?" "Airplanes, mostly." Vivian smiled. "Just like your dad, long." Emma finally looked up. "Are you the lady who was mean to him?" Nathan almost choked on his water. "Emma?" "It's okay," Vivian said. She looked at Emma seriously. "Yes, I was very mean to your dad. I said things I shouldn't have said, and I tried to get him in trouble for doing the right thing. I was wrong, and I'm trying to make up for it now." Emma considered this. "Are you going to be mean to him again?" "I hope not." "Okay." Emma went back to coloring. Nathan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The dinner was surprisingly comfortable. Vivian asked Emma about school, her friends, her favorite movies. She listened carefully to the answers, never condescending or fake. When Emma excused herself to go to the bathroom, Vivian leaned across the table. "She's wonderful. Thanks. She's basically the only thing I haven't screwed up." "I doubt that's true. You didn't see me trying to make breakfast this morning. I burned toast so badly the smoke alarm went off." Vivian laughed. "I can't cook at all. I live on takeout and protein bars." "That's depressing." "It's efficient." Nathan shook his head. "You need better priorities." "I'm working on it." Emma came back and asked if they could get dessert. Nathan said yes, and they ended up splitting a brownie sundae that was large enough to feed 6 people. When they finally left, Emma tugged on Nathan's sleeve. "I like her," she whispered. "Yeah?" "Yeah, she's not mean anymore." Nathan looked back at Vivian, who was standing by her car in the parking lot, looking somehow smaller and more human than she had in any boardroom or press conference. "No," Nathan said quietly. "I don't think she is." Over the next few weeks, the foundation work intensified. Nathan found himself working closely with Vivian on curriculum design, budget allocation, and partnership agreements with aviation schools across the country. They met twice a week, usually in Vivian's office or at coffee shops halfway between their respective locations. The conversations started professional, but gradually became more personal. Vivian told him about growing up as the daughter of a man everyone feared, and how she'd learned early that being liked and being respected were 2 different things. Nathan told her about losing his wife, about the years of barely holding it together, about the quiet terror of raising a daughter alone and constantly worrying he was doing everything wrong. "You're doing better than you think," Vivian said one afternoon while they were reviewing grant proposals at a Starbucks. "How would you know?" "Because Emma adores you. Kids don't fake that kind of trust." Nathan stared at his laptop screen. "I just don't want to let her down." "You won't." "You sound pretty confident for someone who doesn't have kids." Vivian was quiet for a moment. "I was supposed to. A long time ago. It didn't work out." Nathan looked up. I'm sorry. It's fine, ancient history. But her expression suggested it wasn't fine at all. They didn't talk about it again. But something shifted between them after that conversation. A mutual understanding that they were both carrying things they didn't like to talk about, and maybe that was okay. One Saturday, Vivian showed up at Nathan's apartment unannounced with a bag of groceries. "What are you doing?" Nathan asked, still in sweatpants and a faded Air Force t-shirt. "Teaching you to cook. Emma says you burn everything." "She told you that?" "Last time we had lunch, she's very concerned about your diet." Nathan let her in, shaking his head. Emma was thrilled. She sat on the counter, swinging her legs and offering unhelpful commentary while Vivian walked Nathan through making a basic pasta dish. "You're supposed to salt the water first," Emma said. "I know that." "Then why didn't you do it?" "I was getting there." Vivian laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that Nathan had never heard before. The pasta turned out surprisingly edible. They ate together at the kitchen table, Emma chattering about school while Vivian asked questions, and Nathan watched the two of them interact with something warm and unfamiliar settling in his chest. After dinner, Emma fell asleep on the couch during a movie. Nathan carried her to bed, then came back to find Vivian cleaning the kitchen. "You don't have to do that. I made the mess." "Technically, I made the mess. You just supervised." Vivian smiled and kept washing dishes. Nathan leaned against the counter. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why are you really doing all this? The foundation, the cooking lessons, the lunches with Emma. Is it guilt or something else?" Vivian dried her hands on a towel and turned to face him. "At first it was guilt. I did something terrible and I wanted to fix it. But then I started spending time with you and Emma, and I realized I actually enjoyed it. You're real in a way most people in my life aren't. You don't want anything from me except honesty. That's rare." "What about your friends? Your family? Your mom's?" "Mom. I don't really have friends. Just business associates. And my family." She trailed off. "My father was brilliant and terrifying. My mother died when I was 12. I have a brother I haven't spoken to in 4 years. That's pretty much it." Nathan felt something crack inside him. That sounds lonely. It is, but I got used to it. She picked up her bag. "I should go. It's late." "Vivian, wait." She turned. Nathan didn't know what he was going to say until the words were already out. "You don't have to be alone anymore, if you don't want to be." Vivian stared at him, her expression unreadable. "Nathan, I'm not saying I've forgiven everything. I'm not even sure what this is, but Emma likes you, and I think I'm starting to like you too, and maybe that's worth figuring out." Vivian's eyes were bright. "Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, we can't go back." "I'm not sure about anything except that I'm tired of being careful all the time." Vivian stepped closer. "I don't know how to do this. Relationships, normal life, any of it." "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." She kissed him then, tentative at first, then deeper, her hands gripping the front of his shirt like she was afraid he might disappear. When they finally broke apart, Vivian was smiling. "This is probably a terrible idea. Probably." "Your daughter is going to have opinions." "She already does. She told me I should ask you out weeks ago." Vivian laughed. "Smart kid." They stood there in Nathan's tiny kitchen, the overhead light buzzing softly, and for the first time in years, Nathan felt like something might actually work out. It wouldn't be easy, but maybe it would be worth it. The first real fight happened 3 weeks later, over something completely stupid. Nathan had picked Emma up from school and driven to Vivian's penthouse in Manhattan for dinner, something they'd started doing twice a week. Emma was working on homework at the dining table while Nathan helped Vivian in the kitchen, which mostly meant handing her ingredients and trying not to get in the way. "Your phone's been buzzing for the past 10 minutes, Vivian said, nodding toward the counter where Nathan's phone was lighting up repeatedly. Nathan wiped his hands on a towel and checked the screen. 7 missed calls from Jake, 3 from Marcus Harris, and a string of texts that all said variations of "call me now." He stepped into the hallway and dialed Jake. "Finally, where have you been?" "I was cooking. What's going on?" "There's a problem with the Learjet that came in this afternoon, the one scheduled for that charter flight to Boston tomorrow morning." Nathan felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of problem?" Engine control linkage is showing signs of fatigue. Could be nothing, but the readings are borderline. Harris wants to push the flight through anyway because the client's some tech CEO who's already pissed about a previous delay. Jake, if the linkage is compromised... I know, but Harris says the readings are within acceptable limits according to the manual. He wants a second opinion before he grounds it. From who? From you. He specifically asked for you. Nathan closed his eyes. I'm in Manhattan. It'll take me 40 minutes to get there. He needs an answer tonight. The client's expecting to fly out at 6 a.m. Nathan looked back through the doorway at Emma, who was chewing on her pencil and frowning at her math worksheet. I'll be there in an hour. He hung up and walked back into the kitchen. Vivian took one look at his face and turned off the stove. What happened? Work emergency? I need to go. Now? Yeah. Emma looked up from her homework. But we haven't eaten yet. I know, kiddo. I'm sorry. Nathan grabbed his jacket. Can you two finish dinner without me? I'll be back as soon as I can. Vivian's expression shifted, something careful and controlled sliding into place. How long will you be? I don't know. A few hours, maybe? Nathan, we had plans. I know, but this is important. There's an aircraft safety issue and they need me to evaluate it. Can't someone else do it? Nathan stopped. It's my job, Vivian. Your job is also working on the foundation. We have a meeting with potential donors tomorrow morning. You were supposed to review the presentation tonight. I'll review it later. When? After midnight when you're exhausted? Nathan felt frustration rising in his chest. I don't really have a choice here. If I don't go and something happens, then someone else deals with it. You can't be the only person responsible for every aircraft safety issue in New Jersey. That's not fair. Vivian crossed her arms. What's not fair is you treating the foundation like it's a hobby you do when your real job doesn't need you. That's not what I'm doing. Then what are you doing? Because from where I'm standing, you're about to walk out on dinner, on Emma's homework help, and on work we actually committed to finishing tonight. Emma's voice cut through the tension. Dad, it's okay. You should go. Nathan looked at his daughter, who was watching him with that worried expression again. I know your job is important. We'll be fine. But she didn't look fine. She looked like a kid who was used to her dad leaving when something more important came up. Nathan's chest hurt. He looked at Vivian. We'll talk about this later. Sure, Vivian said, her voice flat. Nathan kissed Emma on the head and left. The drive to the hangar took 53 minutes through evening traffic. By the time Nathan arrived, Jake had the Learjet's maintenance log spread across a workbench, and Marcus Harris was pacing near the aircraft. About time, Harris said. Nathan ignored him and went straight to the engine cowling. Show me the readings. Jake pulled up the diagnostic data on his tablet. The engine control linkage showed microfractures in 3 connection points, small enough that they fell within manufacturer tolerance, but clustered in a pattern that made Nathan's instinct scream warning. He spent 40 minutes inspecting every inch of the linkage system, taking photos, running additional diagnostics, and cross-referencing the data against maintenance records. Finally, he stood up and faced Harris. Ground it. The readings are within acceptable parameters. Barely. And the fracture pattern suggests progressive failure. If that linkage lets go during flight, you lose throttle control. Nathan, this client has already threatened to take his business elsewhere. If we ground another aircraft, then he takes his business elsewhere. I'm not signing off on this. Harris's jaw clenched. You're making this personal. Ever since the Sinclair incident, you've been overcompensating. Nathan felt anger flash hot through his chest. I'm doing my job. The same job I was doing before any of this happened. If you want to overrule me, that's your call. But my name's not going anywhere near that flight log. He walked out before Harris could respond. The drive back to Manhattan was slower. Late-night traffic, construction delays, his mind churning through the argument with Vivian and the look on Emma's face when he'd left. It was past 11 when he got back to the penthouse. Vivian was sitting on the couch with her laptop, still dressed but looking exhausted. Emma was asleep in the guest bedroom. How'd it go? Vivian asked without looking up. I grounded the plane. Of course you did. Nathan dropped his jacket on a chair. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. I'm just not surprised. She closed her laptop. Did you eat? No. There's leftover pasta in the fridge. Nathan walked to the kitchen and reheated a plate in the microwave. When he came back, Vivian was still on the couch, staring at nothing. He sat down next to her. Are we going to talk about this? About what? About you being angry that I left. Vivian finally looked at him. I'm not angry that you left. I'm angry that you didn't even hesitate. The second your old job called, everything else stopped mattering. That's not true. Isn't it? Nathan, we're trying to build something here. The foundation, us, a life that's bigger than just reacting to whatever crisis comes up. But you keep pulling back into the same patterns. Always the hero, always the guy who has to fix everything himself. Someone has to. No, someone doesn't. That's the whole point of the foundation, to create systems so you're not the only person standing between safety and disaster. But you won't let anyone else do it. Nathan set his plate down. You're right. I should have just let them fly a compromised aircraft and hoped for the best. That's not what I'm saying, and you know it. Then what are you saying? Vivian's voice cracked slightly. I'm saying I'm scared that you're never going to trust this enough to let it be real. That the second things get complicated, you'll retreat back into being the lone engineer who doesn't need anyone. Nathan stared at her. I'm here, aren't I? I came back. You came back at 11:30 after missing dinner, missing Emma's homework, missing the work we were supposed to do together. You came back to leftovers and a pissed-off girlfriend who's starting to wonder if she's ever going to be more than second place to your job. That's not fair, Vivian. You know my job matters. So does this. So do I. She stood up. But I can't compete with your savior complex. I don't have a savior complex. Yes, you do. You've built your entire identity around being the guy who sacrifices everything to keep people safe. And that's admirable, Nathan. It really is. But it's also lonely. And I don't think you've figured out yet how to let anyone else in. Nathan felt something cold settle in his chest. So what do you want me to do? I want you to decide what you actually want. Because right now it feels like you're trying to have it both ways. The quiet life with Emma, and the heroic engineer career and the relationship with me, and the foundation work. And you can't do all of it. Something has to give. Nothing has to give. I can balance. You can't, Vivian said quietly. Nobody can. And the longer you try, the more you're going to hurt the people who care about you. She walked to the bedroom and closed the door. Nathan sat on the couch until 2 a.m, his food cold and untouched, trying to figure out if she was right. The next morning was awkward. Emma woke up cheerful, oblivious to the tension. Vivian made breakfast and kept her voice light, but there was a distance between them that hadn't been there before. Nathan took Emma to school, went to work, and tried to focus on paperwork, but his mind kept circling back to Vivian's words. Something has to give. That afternoon, Jake found him in the maintenance bay. So I heard Harris called you last night. Yeah. And you grounded the Learjet. Yeah. Good, because when they tore apart that linkage this morning, they found it was about 6 hours away from complete failure. Nathan looked up. Seriously? Seriously. If that plane had taken off, the linkage would have snapped mid-flight. You saved lives, man. Again. Nathan should have felt vindicated. Instead, he just felt tired. That evening, he drove to the Foundation's temporary office in a converted warehouse space in Newark. Vivian was already there, reviewing architectural plans for the training facility they were planning to build. Hey, Nathan said from the doorway. Hey, can we talk? Vivian set down the plans. Sure. Nathan sat across from her at the conference table. You were right about me trying to do everything. I've been operating like I'm still alone and I have to handle everything myself because there's no one else. But that's not true anymore. I have you. I have the Foundation. I have people who actually want to help. Vivian's expression softened. Nathan, let me finish. I don't know how to not be that person. The guy who drops everything when there's a safety issue. It's how I'm wired, but I'm trying to figure out how to be that person and still have room for other things. For you, For Emma. For a life that's not just work and survival. I'm not asking you to stop caring about safety. I know. You're asking me to trust that other people can care about it too. And that's hard for me. But I'm going to work on it. Vivian reached across the table and took his hand. I'm sorry I said you had a savior complex. That was harsh. It was also kind of accurate. She smiled. Maybe a little, but it's one of the things I love about you. You actually give a damn. Most people don't. Nathan squeezed her hand. I give a damn about you too. I'm just bad at showing it sometimes. We're both bad at this. I've spent my entire adult life in boardrooms and power plays. I don't know how to do normal relationship things like compromising and communicating and not treating everything like a negotiation. So we'll figure it out together, like we said. Yeah, Vivian said softly. Together. They worked late that night, side by side, reviewing donor proposals and curriculum outlines. Around 9 o'clock, Nathan ordered pizza and they ate it straight from the box while arguing about whether the foundation should focus on initial training or continuing education programs. Both, Vivian said. We don't have the budget for both. Then we raise more money. From who? We've already approached every aviation company on the East Coast. Heat. Vivian pulled up her laptop. Then we expand. West Coast, Europe, Asia. Aviation safety isn't a regional issue. Nathan stared at her. You want to make this international? Eventually, why not? Because that's insane. So was standing up to me in that terminal, and look how that turned out. Nathan laughed despite himself. Fair point. They drove back to Nathan's apartment together. Emma was asleep at Mrs. Chen's place, so they picked her up quietly and carried her back home. After tucking Emma into bed, Nathan and Vivian collapsed on the couch. I'm exhausted, Vivian said, her head resting on Nathan's shoulder. Same. This is nice, though. What is? This, us, feeling like a team instead of two people trying to figure out how to coexist. Nathan kissed the top of her head. Yeah, it is. But 3 weeks later, everything fell apart. But 3 weeks? It started with a phone call Nathan received while he was at the hangar doing a routine inspection. The number was local, but unfamiliar. Mr. Reed? This is Principal Anderson from Riverside Elementary. I'm calling about Emma. Nathan's blood went cold. What happened? Is she okay? She's in the nurse's office. She collapsed during PE class. We've already called an ambulance. Nathan was moving before the principal finished speaking. He grabbed his jacket, shouted something at Jake about an emergency, and sprinted to his car. The drive to Emma's school took 8 minutes, but felt like hours. An ambulance was already parked outside, lights flashing. Nathan ran through the front doors and found Emma sitting on a gurney in the hallway, looking small and scared with an oxygen mask over her face. Dad, Nathan dropped to his knees beside her. I'm here, kiddo. What happened? I don't know. I just got really dizzy, and then I couldn't breathe right. A paramedic stepped forward. Mr. Reed, we're taking her to St. Mary's for evaluation. Her oxygen levels dropped during the episode, but they've stabilized now. What caused it? We're not sure yet. Could be stress, anxiety, or something cardiac. The doctors will run tests. Nathan climbed into the ambulance with Emma and held her hand the entire ride to the hospital. The emergency room was chaos. Forms to fill out, nurses asking questions, doctors running tests. Emma was taken for an EKG, blood work, and a chest x-ray. Nathan sat in the waiting room and called Vivian. Nathan, what's wrong? Emma collapsed at school. We're at St. Mary's. I'm on my way. She arrived 30 minutes later, still in her business suit, her face pale and worried. Nathan stood up and she pulled him into a hug. What did the doctor say? Nothing yet. They're still running tests. They sat together in the plastic chairs, Nathan's leg bouncing anxiously, until a doctor finally emerged. Mr. Reed? I'm Dr. Patel. Emma's tests came back mostly normal, which is good news. Her heart is fine, no structural issues. But her stress hormone levels are significantly elevated. Nathan felt his stomach drop. Stress? Yes. Sometimes physical symptoms like shortness of breath and dizziness can be triggered by anxiety, especially in children who've experienced significant life changes or trauma. What kind of trauma? Dr. Patel glanced at his chart. The intake nurse noted that Emma mentioned her father being on the news a lot recently. She said kids at school have been asking her questions, and she doesn't like the attention. She also mentioned feeling worried about her dad because he seems stressed all the time. Nathan felt like someone had punched him in the chest. Is she going to be okay? Vivian asked. Physically, yes, but she needs follow-up with a pediatric therapist to address the underlying anxiety. Kids are resilient, but they also internalize stress in ways we don't always see until something like this happens. They let Nathan see Emma an hour later. She was sitting up in bed, coloring in a book one of the nurses had given her. Hey, kiddo. Hi, Dad. Am I in trouble? What? No. Why would you be in trouble? Because I got sick at school and you had to leave work. Oh. Nathan sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her into a hug. You're not in trouble. You're never in trouble for being sick. I'm sorry I wasn't there faster. You came really fast. Not fast enough. Emma pulled back and looked at him seriously. Dad, are you okay? I should be asking you that question. I know, but you seem sad a lot and worried. And I think maybe it's because of all the stuff with the lady on TV and the foundation and everything. Nathan's throat felt tight. Emma, none of that is your fault. I know, but it's still happening. And I don't want you to be sad. I'm not sad. I'm just trying to figure some things out. Like what? Nathan didn't know how to explain it to a 7-year-old. Like how to be a good dad and also do important work and also spend time with people I care about. It's harder than I thought it would be. Emma reached up and patted his cheek. You're already a good dad, even when you're busy. Nathan felt tears prick his eyes. Thanks, kiddo. Vivian appeared in the doorway. Hey, Emma. How are you feeling? Better. My chest doesn't hurt anymore. That's good. Vivian sat down in the chair next to the bed. Can I tell you something? Okay. Your dad is one of the bravest people I've ever met, but sometimes brave people forget that they need help too. So if he ever seems like he's trying to do too much, you can tell him. He'll listen to you. Emma looked at Nathan. Is that true? Nathan nodded. Yeah, it's true. Okay, then you need to stop trying to do everything yourself. Nathan laughed despite the tightness in his chest. You sound like Vivian. Good, Emma said. She's smart. They kept Emma overnight for observation. Nathan stayed with her, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair next to her bed. Vivian went home around midnight, but came back at 6 in the morning with coffee and breakfast. The doctor cleared Emma to go home the next afternoon with instructions to follow up with a therapist and to reduce stress wherever possible. Nathan took a week off work. He and Emma spent the time doing quiet things, watching movies, baking cookies that came out slightly burned, building a blanket fort in the living room. Vivian came over most evenings and helped with dinner, never pushing or demanding attention, just being present. One night, after Emma was asleep, Nathan and Vivian sat on the couch drinking tea. I've been thinking, Nathan said. About? About what you said. About something having to give. He set down his mug. I think I need to step back from the hangar. Not completely, but maybe reduce my hours. Focus more on the foundation. Vivian looked at him carefully. Are you sure? I don't want you making this decision because of what happened with Emma. Mama's veterana. I'm not. I mean, I am, but not just because of that. The foundation matters more, and I can't do both jobs at full capacity without losing my mind. What will you do for money? The foundation's paying me a salary now, right? A modest one. Modest is fine. I don't need much. Nathan paused. And honestly, Emma needs me more present. She's been carrying stress she shouldn't have to carry because I've been too busy to notice. Vivian took his hand. You're a good father. Ashur. I'm trying to be, but I think I've been so focused on keeping us afloat that I forgot to actually live. So what does living look like? Nathan smiled. I don't know yet, but I want to find out. The next week, Nathan submitted his resignation to the aviation company. Marcus Harris tried to convince him to stay, offering more money and flexible hours, but Nathan's mind was made up. His last day was surprisingly emotional. Jake organized a small party in the maintenance bay with cake and a card signed by everyone. Even Harris shook his hand and admitted he'd been one of the best engineers they'd ever had. "You sure about this?" Jake asked as Nathan was packing up his desk. "Yeah, it's time." "Well, what are you going to do now?" "Build something that matters." Nathan walked out of the hangar for the last time and felt lighter than he had in years. The foundation was officially incorporated 3 weeks later. Nathan became the full-time director of training and safety, with an office in the new facility and a team of 3 people reporting to him. Emma started therapy and slowly began to open up about the anxiety she'd been carrying. Her therapist recommended family sessions, and Nathan found himself sitting in an office once a week talking about feelings and communication patterns and learning how to be better. It was uncomfortable and awkward and absolutely necessary. Vivian attended some of the sessions too, particularly the ones about blended families and how to navigate relationships when kids were involved. "I've never done this before," Vivian admitted during one session. "Been part of a family. I don't really know what I'm doing." The therapist smiled. "Nobody does. That's the secret." One Saturday afternoon, Nathan and Emma were building a model airplane at the kitchen table when Vivian showed up with a bag from the craft store. "I brought supplies," she announced. Emma's eyes lit up. "What kind?" "Paint, brushes, glitter. I thought we could decorate the airplane when you're done building it." Emma looked at Nathan. "Can we?" "Sure, kiddo." They spent the next 2 hours working together, Nathan handling the precise assembly work, Emma choosing colors, and Vivian carefully painting details with the intense focus she usually reserved for contract negotiations. "You're really good at this," Emma said, watching Vivian add tiny silver stripes to the airplane's tail. "I used to do art before I went into business. My father thought it was impractical." "That's sad." "Yeah," Vivian said softly. "It was." Nathan watched them work side by side and felt something settle in his chest, a sense of rightness he hadn't felt in years. Later that evening, after Emma was in bed, Nathan found Vivian standing on the small balcony of his apartment looking out at the city lights. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just thinking. About how different my life is now compared to 6 months ago. How I almost missed all of this because I was too stubborn to admit I was wrong." Nathan wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You weren't too stubborn. You figured it out. Barely. If you hadn't stood up to me that day, but I did. And you listened, eventually." Vivian turned in his arms. "I love you. You know that, right?" Nathan's breath caught. They hadn't said those words yet, had been dancing around them for weeks. "I love you too," he said. "Even when you're bossy and controlling and impossible, I prefer decisive and organized." "Sure, let's go with that." Vivian kissed him, soft and deep, and Nathan felt the last pieces of his resistance crumble. This was real. This was happening. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Nathan wasn't afraid of what came next. 1 year later, Nathan stood in front of 200 people at the Reed Aviation Safety Foundation's official opening ceremony and realized he had no idea what he was supposed to say. The facility was stunning, a modern 3-story building with glass walls, state-of-the-art training simulators, and classrooms designed specifically for hands-on aviation safety education. Outside, a banner stretched across the entrance with the Foundation's mission statement printed in bold letters: "Safety first, always." Vivian stood next to him on the small stage, elegant in a dark blue dress, looking completely comfortable with the cameras and the crowd. Emma sat in the front row between Mrs. Chen and Jake, swinging her legs and waving at Nathan every few seconds. "You're going to be great," Vivian whispered. "I hate public speaking." "I know, but these people came here because they believe in what you're building. Just talk to them like they're human beings instead of an audience." Nathan stepped up to the microphone. "Hi, I'm Nathan Reed, and a year ago I was just a guy trying to keep airplanes safe and raise my daughter without completely screwing up. I wasn't planning to be here. I wasn't planning any of this." He gestured to the building behind him. "But sometimes life doesn't care about your plans." A few people in the crowd chuckled. Nathan continued, I grounded an aircraft last year because it wasn't safe to fly. The person who wanted to be on that plane was powerful, important, and used to getting her way. She didn't like being told no. And honestly, I didn't like telling her, but I did it anyway because that's the job. That's what we sign up for when we become engineers or pilots or mechanics. We put safety above everything else, even when it's inconvenient, even when it costs us. He paused, looking out at the faces staring back at him. This foundation exists because that choice shouldn't be as hard as it was. Nobody should have to risk their career to do the right thing. Nobody should have to stand alone against pressure from bosses or clients or anyone else who thinks deadlines matter more than lives. We're building something here that creates systems and support and training so that when you face that moment, and you will face it, you won't be alone. The crowd applauded. Vivian stepped up next and Nathan moved aside gratefully. Nathan's being modest, Vivian said into the microphone. The truth is, he saved my life. Not just physically, though he did that too. He saved me from becoming someone I didn't want to be, someone so focused on power and control that I forgot what actually mattered. This foundation is my way of honoring that, of making sure his courage doesn't become a single moment in time, but a lasting institution that changes how we think about safety in aviation. She looked at Nathan. I've learned a lot this past year about accountability, about admitting when you're wrong, about building something meaningful instead of just building wealth. And I've learned that the best partnerships aren't built on power dynamics or contracts. They're built on mutual respect and shared purpose. More applause. After the ceremony, Nathan spent 2 hours shaking hands with donors, aviation professionals, and journalists who wanted quotes for articles. Emma stayed close to his side, occasionally tugging on his sleeve when she got bored. Can we go home soon? She whispered during a conversation with a representative from the FAA. Almost done, kiddo. You said that 20 minutes ago. This time I mean it. Vivian rescued them eventually, gracefully extracting Nathan from a conversation about funding structures and steering him toward the parking lot. That went well, she said. I guess. You guess? Nathan, you just launched a National Aviation Safety Foundation. You can acknowledge that it's a big deal. It feels weird, like I'm pretending to be someone important. You're someone important. You just don't like admitting it. Emma climbed into the back seat. Can we get ice cream? Bus seats. It's 5 o'clock, Nathan said. So? So that's basically dinner time. Ice cream is dinner, Emma said matter-of-factly. Vivian laughed. I like her logic. They ended up at the same ice cream place Nathan and Emma had been going to for years. A small shop with sticky tables and a menu board that hadn't been updated since 1995. Emma ordered her usual chocolate chip cookie dough. Nathan got vanilla. Vivian studied the menu like it was a corporate contract before finally choosing mint chocolate chip. You were nervous, Vivian said, watching Nathan pick at his ice cream. Still am. Why? Because now it's real. Now we have a building and staff and students enrolled for the first training session next month. Now we have to actually deliver on all the promises we made. We will. What if we don't? What if this whole thing falls apart? Vivian reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Then we'll figure it out and fix it. That's what we do. Mates, Emma looked up from her ice cream. Dad, you always say worrying about stuff that hasn't happened yet is a waste of time. I do say that. So stop worrying. Nathan smiled despite himself. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't listen. Vivian laughed hard enough that she nearly choked on her ice cream. That night, after Emma was asleep, Nathan and Vivian sat on his apartment balcony sharing a bottle of wine and watching the city lights. I've been thinking about something, Vivian said. That's usually dangerous. I'm serious. I want to move in with you. Nathan looked at her. Here? In this apartment? Well, maybe not here specifically. This place is kind of small for 3 people. But somewhere. Together. The 3 of us. Nathan's heart was pounding. That's a big step. I know, but we're basically living together already. I'm here 5 nights a week. My toothbrush is in your bathroom. Half my clothes are in your closet. We might as well make it official. What about Emma, said. What about her? She already told me last week that she wants me to teach her how to paint, and she asked if I could come to her school's art show next month. I think she's on board. Well, Nathan took a sip of wine. I never thought I'd do this again. After my wife died, I figured it was just going to be me and Emma forever. And now? Now I'm terrified and excited and completely unsure if I'm ready, but I want to try. With you. Mama. Vivian kissed him softly. Good, because I already started looking at houses. Of course you did. There's one in Montclair with 4 bedrooms, a good school district, and a backyard big enough for Emma to play in. We could go look at it this weekend. Nathan shook his head, smiling. You don't waste time, do you? Life's too short. They found the house 3 weeks later, a renovated colonial with hardwood floors, a fireplace, and a kitchen big enough for all 3 of them to cook in without tripping over each other. Emma loved it immediately, especially the bedroom on the 2nd floor with windows that overlooked the backyard. Can I paint the walls purple? She asked. Absolutely not, Nathan said. Why not? Because purple walls are insane. Vivian crouched down next to Emma. What if we did one accent wall in purple and the rest in a softer lavender? That way you get your color, but it's not overwhelming. Emma considered this. Okay, that works. Nathan looked at Vivian. You're going to spoil her. That's the plan. They moved in 2 months later. The transition was messier than Nathan expected. Boxes everywhere, furniture that didn't quite fit, arguments about where to hang pictures and whether they needed a dining table that seated 8 people. We're 3 people, Nathan said, staring at the massive table Vivian wanted to order. But we'll have guests. Your coworkers, my colleagues, Emma's friends. Emma's friends are 7 years old. They eat on the floor. Not forever, they don't. Chus. They compromised on a table that seated 6. Emma adjusted quickly. She loved having more space, loved the backyard, loved that Vivian was always there in the mornings to help with breakfast and homework. The nightmares she'd had after the hospital incident faded. Her therapist said she was making excellent progress. Nathan adjusted slower. He still woke up sometimes in the middle of the night, disoriented by the unfamiliar room, reaching for Emma's baby monitor even though she was 8 now and didn't need one. Old habits died hard. But gradually, the house started to feel like home. Vivian planted flowers in the front garden. Nathan built a swing set in the backyard. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator. They developed routines. Sunday morning pancakes, Friday movie nights, Saturday trips to the farmer's market. It was domestic and mundane and absolutely perfect. The Foundation's first training cohort graduated 6 months after the facility opened. 12 students, engineers and pilots and mechanics who'd spent 6 weeks learning not just technical skills, but how to navigate the ethical complexities of aviation safety. Nathan gave a short speech at the graduation ceremony. You're entering an industry that doesn't always make it easy to do the right thing. You'll face pressure from bosses, from clients, from schedules and budgets and people who think convenience matters more than safety. And when that happens, I want you to remember something. Your job isn't to make people happy. Your job is to keep them alive. Everything else is secondary. One of the graduates, a young woman named Maria, who'd worked as a mechanic for 3 years, raised her hand. What if we get fired for speaking up? Then you get fired, and you find another job, and you do it again, because your integrity is worth more than any paycheck. That's easy for you to say. You're famous now. You have options. Nathan shook his head. I had a 7-year-old daughter and no savings when I grounded that plane. I thought I was going to lose everything. But I did it anyway because the alternative was worse. And I'm not special. You can do the same thing. You will do the same thing. That's why you're here. After the ceremony, Maria approached him. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Do you ever regret it? Standing up to Sinclair? All the chaos that came after? Nathan thought about it. Sometimes I regret how hard it was on my daughter. But do I regret the choice itself? No, because that choice led me here, to this foundation, to this work, to a life I never could have imagined a year ago. Sometimes the hardest decisions end up being the ones that change everything. Maria nodded. Thank you for being honest. That's all I know how to be it. That evening, Nathan came home to find Vivian and Emma in the kitchen attempting to bake cookies. The counter was covered in flour, the recipe book was splattered with butter, and Emma had chocolate chips stuck in her hair. "What happened here?" Nathan asked. "We're baking," Emma said proudly. "It looks like a bomb went off." "That's part of the process," Vivian said, wiping flour off her cheek. The recipe said mix thoroughly. We're being thorough. Nathan laughed and joined them, helping salvage what they could of the cookie dough and trying not to focus on the fact that they'd somehow managed to get flour on the ceiling. The cookies came out slightly burned but edible. They ate them on the back porch while the sun set, Emma chattering about school and Vivian telling stories about disastrous board meetings. "This is nice," Vivian said quietly, after Emma had run off to chase fireflies in the yard. "Yeah," Nathan agreed. "It is, Ian. I never thought I'd have this, a family, a home, someone who actually likes me for who I am instead of what I can do for them." Nathan pulled her closer. "I more than like you." "I know, but still, it's strange. Good strange, but strange." "Welcome to normal life," Vivian smiled. "I think I like normal life." The foundation grew steadily. By the end of the second year, they'd trained over 60 students and established partnerships with aviation schools across the country. Media coverage remained positive. Funding was stable. The board, which now included 3 external aviation safety experts, met quarterly and provided solid oversight. Nathan settled into his role as director of training. He was good at it, developing curriculum, mentoring students, handling the day-to-day operations. He still missed hands-on aircraft maintenance sometimes, but the foundation work felt more meaningful. Vivian continued running Apex Global Holdings, but she'd changed her leadership style significantly. She was still demanding and driven, but she'd learned to listen more, to admit mistakes publicly, to prioritize long-term sustainability over short-term wins. Her board had stopped trying to remove her. Investors were happy, and she'd rebuilt her reputation from ruthless CEO to someone who actually cared about doing things right. Emma thrived. She made friends at her new school, joined the art club, and started talking about becoming an aerospace engineer when she grew up. "Just like Dad," she told anyone who asked. "You can be anything you want," Nathan always said. "I know, but planes are cool." One Saturday afternoon, Nathan was helping Emma with a science project when Vivian came home looking exhausted. "You okay?" he asked. "Long day. 3 back-to-back meetings and a conference call with investors in Singapore. Go rest, I've got this. Actually, I wanted to talk to both of you about something." Emma looked up from her poster board. "Are we in trouble?" "No, sweetie, nothing like that." Vivian sat down at the table. "I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next, and I realized something. Apex is stable. The foundation is running well. Emma's settled and happy. Everything's in a good place." Nathan felt his stomach tighten. "Okay? And I want to make sure it stays that way. So I talked to my lawyers this week about updating my will and setting up trusts for both of you." "Vivian, let me finish. If something happens to me, I want to make sure you and Emma are taken care of. The foundation is protected. Everything's locked down legally, so there's no question about continuity or finances or any of that." Nathan stared at her. "Why are you thinking about this now?" "Be stress. Because I'm 42 years old and I've spent most of my life avoiding anything that made me feel vulnerable, including planning for the future. But I have a family now. That changes things." Emma frowned. "Something wrong? Are you sick?" "No, baby, I'm fine. This is just grown-up stuff about making sure we're all protected." Vivian looked at Nathan. "I also wanted to talk to you about something else, about making this official." "Oh, what sampo? Making what official?" Vivian pulled a small box from her jacket pocket and set it on the table. Nathan's breath stopped. "I know this is unconventional," Vivian said. "Usually the man proposes. But we've never done anything the traditional way, so why start now?" She opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band. "Nathan Reed, you've made me a better person. You've taught me what it means to have integrity, to stand up for what's right even when it's hard, to build a life that actually matters. I love you. I love Emma. And I want to spend the rest of my life figuring out this whole family thing with both of you. Will you marry me?" Emma gasped. Say yes, Dad. Nathan felt tears burning his eyes. You're serious? Completely. Vivian, I have an 8-year-old daughter, a modest salary, and a history of making terrible decisions. And I have control issues, a complicated past, and a tendency to work too much. We're perfect for each other. Nathan laughed through the tears. Yeah, we really are. He took the ring from the box. Yes. Obviously, yes. Emma launched herself at both of them, wrapping her arms around their necks and squealing with excitement. Does this mean Vivian's going to be my stepmom? If that's okay with you, Vivian said. That's awesome. Can I be in the wedding? You can be the maid of honor. What's a maid of honor? The most important person besides the bride and groom. Emma grinned. I like that. Well, they got married 4 months later in the backyard of their house, surrounded by family and friends. It was small, maybe 40 people, and nothing like the elaborate corporate events Vivian used to attend. Emma wore a purple dress she'd picked out herself and carried a bouquet of wildflowers. Jake was Nathan's best man. Carolyn Voss from the Newark Observer was there, having become an unexpected friend over the past 2 years. Even Marcus Harris showed up, shaking Nathan's hand and admitting he'd been wrong about pretty much everything. Nathan wore a suit that fit properly for once. Vivian wore a simple white dress that probably cost a fortune but looked effortlessly elegant. When the officiant asked if they had their own vows, Nathan went first. Vivian, when we met, I thought you were the most difficult person I'd ever encountered. Turns out I was right. But you're also the most remarkable. You taught me that making mistakes doesn't define you. How you respond to them does. You taught me that it's okay to ask for help. And you taught me that building a life with someone isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up every day and trying to be better than you were yesterday. I love you, and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life showing you that choosing me was the best decision you ever made. Bécoute. Vivian's eyes were bright with tears. Nathan, you're the first person who ever told me no and meant it. You didn't care about my money or my power or my reputation. You just cared about doing what was right. That integrity is what made me fall in love with you. You make me want to be worthy of the respect you show me every day. You and Emma have given me something I didn't think I deserved. A family. A home. A life that's about more than just winning. I promise to love you both fiercely, to listen even when I think I know better, and to never forget that the best thing I ever did was admit I was wrong about you. There wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. The reception was casual, barbecue, beer, a playlist of songs they'd made together. Emma danced with everyone who'd let her, her purple dress twirling as she spun. Later, when the sun was setting and most of the guests had left, Nathan found Vivian sitting on the porch steps watching Emma teach Mrs. Chen how to do a cartwheel. You okay? He asked, sitting down next to her. I'm perfect. Weird, right? Very weird. Tot. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this to fall apart, but it's not. Nathan took her hand. That's because we built it right, slowly, honestly, with a lot of mistakes along the way. Do you ever think about how things would be different if you just signed off on that plane? Sometimes. But then I remember that I wouldn't have you, or this life, or any of it. And I think maybe everything happened exactly how it was supposed to. Vivian leaned her head on his shoulder. That's surprisingly philosophical for a guy who used to specialize in hydraulic systems. I contain multitudes. Apparently. Emma ran up to them, breathless and grinning. Can we have cake now? We already had cake, Nathan said. I mean more cake. Vivian laughed. I like how you think, kid. They went inside together, the three of them, and cut 3 more pieces of cake that were definitely too large and ate them at the kitchen table while Emma told them about every single detail of the wedding from her perspective. Nathan watched his wife and daughter laughing together, chocolate frosting on their fingers, and realized something profound. For years, he'd defined himself by what he'd lost: his military career, his first wife, the simple life he'd thought he'd have. But loss wasn't the end of the story. It was just the middle part, the hard chapter that made the good chapters possible. He'd stood up to a billionaire CEO and nearly lost everything. And in doing so, he'd found something better than everything. He'd found purpose. He'd found love. He'd found a family that chose each other every single day. The foundation would continue to grow. New students would train there. Lives would be saved because someone learned to say no when it mattered. But the real victory wasn't the foundation or the recognition or even the fact that Vivian Sinclair had transformed from his worst enemy into his life partner. The real victory was this: sitting in a kitchen with two people who loved him, eating too much cake, and knowing that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Life wasn't about avoiding mistakes. It was about having the courage to fix them. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest. And it wasn't about winning. It was about building something that lasted, something real and messy and human. Nathan had spent years surviving, but now, finally, he was living. And that made all the difference.